Welcome to another episode of the North Carolina Tar Heels Insider Podcast. I am your host, Logan Lazarchik, as well as lead beat writer for the North Carolina Tar Heels on SI. Back with another episode today, Friday, June 12th, 2026. Earlier this week, we spoke on the college football program in Chapel Hill, and today we will be discussing the North Carolina Tar Heels college basketball program and specifically the transfer portal class heading into next season. But before we get started, just want to thank you guys again for tuning in each and every day throughout the offseason, throughout the season. We'll be here Monday through Friday during the offseason. You can find this podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Believe, Apple, and all platforms that support podcasts. But as I mentioned, we are going to discuss North Carolina and their transfer portal class that they have assembled this offseason with Michael Malone at the helm, at head coach. And earlier this week, ESPN's Jeff Borzello compiled a list of the top transfer portal classes among Division I schools in the country heading into the 2026-27 college basketball season. And, when you look at this list, obviously Borzello knows what he's talking about. Obviously, most of these rankings, I believe, are accurate. I do think when you first look at these rankings and first assess these rankings, I do believe that North Carolina is a tad low. So we're going to go over who they have brought in this offseason and why they should be viewed a tad higher on this list and what teams they actually should potentially surpass and make an argument for that case. But I also wrote an article about this earlier this week as well, so you can also catch that on North Carolina Tar Heels on SI, and we kind of went over our thoughts and our analysis of the situation. But obviously, North Carolina, we all know what this offseason has entailed for the program. Major changes, seismic shifting changes in the coaching department on the roster. North Carolina lost 8 of their 10 leading scorers from last season through the portal or through the NBA draft circuit. And Michael Malone being hired the same week as the transfer portal window officially opening and being introduced at the university at the Dean E. Smith Center on the same day that the portal officially opened, which was April 7th, put North Carolina behind the 8 ball. And I think the fact that he was able to bring in the allotment of talent that he has, he deserves even more credit based on the circumstances that he was dealt and the cards that he was dealt when he first arrived in Chapel Hill. But when North Carolina first made these additions, which we will go over each player specifically, at first, I would say at least 2 of these players on this list, with another one being still unknown, weren't viewed as potential stars, potential cornerstone players when North Carolina first signed and first landed their commitments. But over the last month or so, we have learned even more. We've received intel, feedback from NBA scouts at the combine, at the NBA scouting combine in Chicago last month. And I think when we take all that into consideration, North Carolina's transfer portal class should be viewed higher. So on this list, Jeff Borzello, he went over the top transfer portal classes. And obviously, there's the likes of Tennessee, Louisville, Texas. North Carolina most likely does not compete with those programs based on the fact that those coaches and teams went out and spent over, especially in Louisville's case, over $20 million in NIL money to compile and construct a championship level roster. North Carolina, when you look at who Malone went after and pursued this offseason, there was more of a concentrated identity that he was trying to establish at North Carolina. And so the players may not steal the headlines. A lot of these names, or most of these names you'll hear, are under the radar names, players that didn't garner as much attention as the other names that these other programs brought in. But I do think when you look at what North Carolina has brought in, we'll dive into it and talk about the players that they brought in: Terrence Brown, Matt Abel, Nicholas Abdallas, Cade Bennerman. Those 3 guards, I think, could lead North Carolina to places that they have not been in the last 5 years. And Hubert Davis, when he first got at North Carolina, first to rise in Chapel Hill. They actually reached the national title game in 2022, and ultimately they fell short, blew a double-digit lead at halftime, similar to what happened this past season against VCU. Now, again, it was against a much better opponent, but entering that tournament as well, North Carolina was an 8 seed, which that's not part of what this program is about. This program wants to be challenging for a 1, 2, 3 seed in the tournament and establish themselves as one of the best teams in the field. And then North Carolina missed the tournament entirely in 2023, reached a Sweet 16 the following year, and then the past 2 seasons has been eliminated in the first round. So hiring Michael Malone was a huge deal for North Carolina, and I believe that they got that hire correct. But when you look at this transfer portal class, Terrence Brown coming in, we all knew that he was an elite scorer, a prolific scorer, and that really has not changed. Now, I do think his game and his overall efficiency will improve at North Carolina, but the next 2 players, I believe their stocks have risen since those additions have been made. And Nicholas Abdallah, Matt Abel, both now viewed as potential first-round picks in the 2027 NBA draft. Nicholas Abdallah was Michael Malone's first transfer portal signing. He signed about a week after the portal window opened, and at that point, North Carolina's activity in the transfer portal was pretty dormant, which raised concerns about how good this roster would be in Michael Malone's first season. But Abdallah was Malone's first target and first player that he officially brought in at North Carolina, and he has proven that to be the right choice. As when Abdallah signed from Virginia Tech, scouts and evaluators, college basketball analysts, they recognize that he can play point guard, shooting guard, small forward on the wing, and those opinions have been validated by his offseason workouts in Chapel Hill, and he has shown the ability to operate as a point guard, and that's going to unlock a lot of aspects for North Carolina's offense. You're going to see several combinations on the floor rotational wise. And I think the fact that he can play point guard, he can, run the offense, I think that is going to be a monumental aspect of North Carolina next season, especially in Malone's offensive friendly scheme. And then there's Matt Abel, who heading into the transfer portal was not really a name that many people, took account into. He was still a player that there's programs that definitely valued him, and he definitely had several suitors that were trying to, vie for his services. He ultimately chose North Carolina because it gave him the best opportunity to develop and potentially become one, really good NBA rotational player. And he was very close to entering the 2026 NBA draft. He was invited to the NBA scouting combine in Chicago last month. And during that time, he showcased his abilities. He was one of the best top performers at the combine, excelling in three-point drills, catch and shoot drills. And then in 2 scrimmages, he also showed his ability to make an impact on both ends of the floor. And I think now that we know that data, now that we've learned a little bit more of what Matt Abel is capable of doing on the court, I do think that his acquisition, his addition to his roster should gain momentum and should also gain recognition. So on this list, Borzello has North Carolina listed as the number 8 transfer portal recruiting class. And again, that is not, that's not an insult or saying that, they should be much higher on this list. I think they're in the ballpark. Like, again, they have a stronger transfer portal class than Duke, Michigan, UConn. So those type of programs are behind North Carolina, which kind of shows what they've accomplished this offseason. So again, I'm not saying that North Carolina should be, a top 5 transfer portal class or top 3 or anything like that. Again, like I said, I think Tennessee, Louisville, I really like St. John's class. Texas is really good. One school that I think, or one program that I think is a bit overrated in terms of who they brought into the transfer portal is Kentucky. Now, again, I've been highly skeptic of Kentucky throughout the offseason, and that may just be biasy of what they have done under Mark Pope. That may be I may be short-sighted in that area, but I do think at the same time Mark Pope has shown a track record of kind of underwhelming, and Kentucky missed out on several recruits. They missed out on other transfer portal targets that they were pursuing. They did land Milan Momcilovic from Iowa State, who entered the transfer portal and entering this offseason was the top rated player in the portal. And obviously, by the time Kentucky signed him a couple weeks ago, he was the best remaining portal player in the portal. So, again, I think that was a great signing by Pope and Kentucky staff. But again, I think that addition somewhat inflates what they accomplished this offseason. And Alex Wilkins, another player that I really liked from Furman, he showcased that he can be an elite player in the first round against UConn. Furman was a 15 seed and challenged UConn throughout that game. But again, I think when I look at Kentucky's class and juxtapose it next to North Carolina's, Kentucky really just went after players who could score. And a lot of these players have the same skill sets. And I think when you look at what North Carolina has accomplished this season and the players that they've brought in, Michael Malone has a clear, identity and plan of what he's trying to bring to North Carolina. And each of these players have unique skill sets. They each bring something different to the table, which is another reason why I believe this transfer portal class is so underrated, because again, you have Terrence Brown, more of a slashing guard. He can also create his own basket. Nicholas Abdallah's 6'9", 216 pounds. He can play off the ball. He can create. He can operate as the lead guard in this offense, run the offense. And then you have Matt Abel, who's really, I believe, a do-it-all guard/wing. And he can defend, multiple positions. Abdallah can defend multiple positions. Matt Abel can operate off the ball as well. He can catch and shoot, run off screens. He's an underrated passer as well. He shot 35% from three-point range last season at North Carolina State, in an offense that I believe was not as, did not create as many open opportunities as Michael Malone will at North Carolina. I think better coaching, better talent. I really think you're going to see Matt Abel's talent really be maximized in the system. And again, he was a borderline first-round pick in this year's draft based on what he heard back from scouts and draft evaluators. And he ultimately returned to North Carolina based on the fact that he was not guaranteed to be a first-round pick. Some teams had him as, late first-round picks. Some teams had him as early second-round picks. So he opted to stay at North Carolina for at least next season and potentially establish himself as a firm first-round pick in 2027. And then I haven't really talked about this player as much, but Cade Betterman, center from Northwestern, he redshirted his freshman season at Northwestern last season. Really, we don't really know what type of player he's going to be in this system. We obviously know the skill set, very athletic, can play on both ends of the floor, has a mid-range game. I think his offensive game is a bit more expansive than Sankeda, although Sankeda obviously has a higher ceiling and is a better player at this point and will most likely be a more polished, better player down the road as well. But I do believe Cade Betterman, as a depth piece off the bench, could serve North Carolina well. So, again, I think it's transfer portal class. Again, ranked number 8, according to ESPN's Jeff Borzello, who compiled a list earlier this week. But I do think at the same time, I think they should be a tad higher. I think that they should supplant Kentucky on this list. I think Kentucky's transfer portal class was a bit inflated based on the Milan Momcilovic addition that they made a couple weeks ago. But other than that, I wasn't overly impressed with that transfer portal class. Again, there's a couple players on that list that Kentucky acquired this offseason that I do believe could develop into very good players for them. I think the skill sets overlap too much when I look at those players that they brought in. In North Carolina, again, I think this roster is defined by versatility. That's going to be the word that I think you will hear a ton this upcoming season. North Carolina leading up to games. You'll hear Jay Billis talking about it at broadcast. You'll hear that during pregame analysis, postgame analysis, during ACC play, during conference tournament play, and NCAA tournament. I think versatility is going to be the most common word that you associate with North Carolina in the 2026 college basketball season. And I think that's why their ceiling is going to be slightly elevated than what we've seen the last couple seasons, because they are going to have the capability of adjusting and adapting on the fly in multiple climates and multiple circumstances, because they have, I believe, several rotation combinations that they can deploy. And I think Michael Malone at the helm, he knows how to coach players. He knows how to develop players. He knows how to maximize the talent out of his players. And he looks for work ethic, which a lot of his players also, exude. So I think North Carolina, again, I think their transfer portal class is quietly one of the better ones. And their roster, that's what their roster is going to be predicated on, is who they have brought in this offseason in the transfer portal. But again, I'm really excited for North Carolina this season. I think that they will continue to slide under the radar until potentially conference play. I think right now there's so much unknown about this team, so many moving parts. The continuity's not there from last season. So people are still going to doubt this team. People are still going to view this team as a 7 to 9 seed in the NCAA tournament. I think they could become a 5 or 6 seed by the time the NCAA tournament rolls around. But again, very excited for North Carolina. And that will do it for our episode today. Again, I appreciate you guys tuning in each and every day during the offseason. We will be back next week with more news, developments, and analysis from Chapel Hill.